Hi, everybody, and welcome to the Wisdom of the Soul class presented by the Ageless Wisdom Mystery School. Very nice to be with you, and I appreciate you joining us live whenever you can, Sunday mornings at 11 Pacific. And if not, we're podcast, and the full program actually is available as a video on YouTube. Just search Ageless Wisdom Mystery School. Also, I haven't mentioned it in months, but I do private sessions, intensives, and the first one's free, so there's no risk. You can set up a Zoom call or a phone call even on my website, and we'll talk about your interest, what it is that you think I might be able to help you with. And then we can either go forward from there or not. Totally up to you. No obligation to do anything. Just a free intake. Go to michaelbenner.com. You'll see a red circle with fireworks going off. And click on that or tap on that, and you'll access my online calendar. And you can book yourself at a time that works for you from what's available. And we'll chat on the telephone. Or like I say, set up a Zoom call if you prefer. Today, I want to talk about the whole process of personal and transpersonal development, which, as I was thinking about it a few days ago, just sort of naturally settled into 7 steps or 7 doors. I've called today's class the 7 doors of transformation. So these are passages or steps. You could call them principles or keys. But I think a good place for us to begin in introducing this, and I do want to do an opening meditation, is to take a step back and ask yourselves why. Why bother? Or how about, why are you even here at a class like this? What is it about this material? Maybe you go way back to the KLOS radio days when I was doing human potential and personal transformation with a little overshadowing sense of spirituality, and that we suggested even back then in the late 70s and early 80s that developing consciousness brought with it a refined set of values. It's curious, it's not often discussed, even by people who are, quote, on the path, is this notion that there are certain ethics or values or levels of morality even that are embedded in waking up. As you wake up, you become less animal-like and more spiritual in your orientation. What does that mean? It means less concerned with material things, materialism and consumerism, and more interested in substance, which is caring, kindness, love, relationships, and the wonderful rewards that come from that. We find initially that each of us has a conscience, a word that sounds a little like conscious or consciousness, but it's spelled very differently. Conscience is developed along with consciousness, and is more than a sense of right or wrong, or even knowing the right answer, much less discerning good from evil. There's wisdom in our conscience, and we have to develop our intuition, not instead of logic, but is a supplement to logic. Intuition gives us access to conscience, and as we develop consciousness, we access these refined values, or our values, our ethics become more refined. How about if I say it that way? And consequently, we suffer less and we become more happy. That's why we do what we do. That's why we want to understand ourselves as spiritual beings or beings of energy. That's all that means. Spirit or spiritual, that root word, spiro, I think, is the root word for it. It really means breath. Spirit is breath. And before we understood radio, for example, much less electricity, that was the allegory for a sense of spirituality, or that life force that illumines and animates us, that vivifies us, that enlivens us, wakes us up, and again, animates us and causes us to be sentient and aware and awake. Well, that's just another way of talking about energy. So the scientist talks about energy and mass, and the metaphysician is more likely to talk about spirit and matter. In between spirit and matter is consciousness. So it's sort of a corollary to Christ or Buddha or the soul that stands between God and man, or between heaven and earth, or spirit and matter. And this is the Trinity. This is what Father, Son, and Mother, or King, Prince, and Queen. Father, Son, Holy Spirit. Church had to take women out of the equation. That's what that's all about. And in our very first classes a year and a half ago, we talked about this quite deeply, this divine Trinity, and the importance of the middle, the consciousness aspect, developing higher consciousness or expanded awareness. That's the interface of spirit and matter. Excuse me. And the lower correspondence of that divine Trinity is the mental, emotional, and physical nature in humans. So do you see how the emotional nature in that lower correspondence, that emotional nature that stands between the mental and the physical, the emotion, the energy in motion, the force that drives ideation into action, is the entryway to the middle element in the higher Trinity, the soul or the consciousness aspect, the Christ, the Christos, the Son or offspring of Father Spirit and Mother Matter. There's a short course in metaphysics for you right there. So that's our path. You go through the heart, not the head. You can't think your way to an understanding of this stuff. I mean, thinking is part of it. There are elements of logic in metaphysics and mysticism. It's important to be a critical thinker and to be logical and to love empirical science. We don't reject that as a matter of faith. You blend the two. But having acknowledged the value of the mental nature and logic, intuition is much more of a feeling, isn't it? Intuition is much more emotional. And so that interface in the lower correspondence, emotion standing between mental thoughts and physical action, the thoughts, the energy, the emotion is the force that drives the energy into action. We can see that this is the path through the heart to the wisdom of the soul. That's the name of this whole series, the wisdom of the soul. And higher consciousness, that elevated perspective, that exalted sense of self, which is always happy for no reason and always at peace and always has the answer and always understands. And I'm not going to say that any of us are going to arrive at this destination. It's important to continue to remind ourselves that it's not a destination. Even the idea of heaven is, or nirvana, samadhi, satori, this is not a place. This is not a destination. It's a level of consciousness, a degree to which we become awake and aware. So what is that whole process? I'm going to break it down today into 7 doors and just touch on each one in a real cursory way so that maybe we can get a conceptual understanding, a big picture, or an overview of this whole process and remind ourselves, reorient ourselves, reminding ourselves, what is this longing that I have? What is this this hunger, this appetite to discover a sense of self that goes beyond the character that we play in our attempt to earn the approval and acceptance of other people? Beyond that character, that face that we present to other people, which changes depending on who we're talking to, you know. When my parents were alive, I talked to them, even as a grown man, very differently than I talked to my friends. And at work, we're probably a different persona. We present a different face at work than we do when we're at home. And so, how many characters are there? How many of me do we have stored away that we present to other people? And what unifies that sense of self? Who are we? What are we for? These are questions we begin to ask as little children, and they persist throughout our lives. And some of us are bound and determined to pursue it with vigor and figure it out. Who am I? Beyond the ego or persona nature, what is it that unifies all these different selves, these faces that we present to each other? Let's do an opening meditation, and then we'll talk about the 7 doors of transformation. So I know this is, for a lot of you, your favorite part. So get comfortable in your chair or on your furniture, meditation pillow, your meditation bench, cross-legged on the bed, wherever you happen to be. Close your eyes. Center yourself. Get a sense of being balanced. And begin to take a few slow, deep breaths. Slow, deep, deliberate from the abdomen. Pulling in strength and power as you inhale and as you exhale. Create and sense the feeling of letting go. Muscles relaxing and unwinding. Feel the letting go. 3 or 4 slow, deep breaths will do it. And then begin to breathe normally. Allow your body to breathe itself, which I like to remind us is also a letting go. It's trusting yourself, trusting that your body and your brain will breathe you without any effort on your part, without volition, without willing yourself to breathe. It just happens automatically. If you let go of it, now you're no longer the breather. When you took that nice, slow, deep breath and held for a moment and then chose the moment to begin to exhale and relax, you were the breather. Now you're the one who watches. You are the awareness of your body breathing itself. So scan your body slowly with your attention, sweeping like that desktop scanner that you have connected to your computer. Just sweep slowly from one end of your body to the other and let go of any remaining residual tension. Feel the letting go. See, it sort of falls off in layers, sort of like peeling an onion, doesn't it? You think you're all nice and relaxed, and then you realize you could go a little deeper, let go a little bit more. So continue to do that for a minute. Create and sense the feeling of letting go. Becoming more and more relaxed, feeling safer and safer, which allows you to become more vulnerable. But because you're safe, it's okay to be that aware. Vulnerability allows awareness. It promotes sensitivity. We become more alert, open, and receptive. Think of yourself at the very top of your head as being open and receptive to some gentle downward precipitation of energy, of spirit, a life force, like the Force in Star Wars. May the Force be with you. It's the singular life force. Outside of us, it is everywhere equally present. And within us, this illumining and animating force becomes present as we let go of our resistance to it, as we release muscular tension and release, as we often call it, the pressure, the stress that builds as a result of viewing life as a struggle, as if it were a series, a never-ending series of problems. Letting go is accepting reality and acknowledging the truth of things, that you might be better able to respond. Accepting personal responsibility includes acknowledging our ability to choose a response. That requires us to shift our focus from struggling against what's done to us or what seems to be happening against us, as if we're a target or a victim or an effect of a life done to us. Shifting your attention from that worldview to one of accepting and acknowledging the reality of things, to allow yourself to choose a response. Consider what a radical and significant difference that is. To give up the struggle, the resistance that brings all that tension into your body in the first place. And say to yourself, I have choices. Just to remind yourself, because we often forget, or we believe there's only one choice. We live in such a two-dimensional and binary either-or world. I have two choices, three choices. I have more choices than are immediately apparent. Now, those are two affirmations. Letting go, shifting your awareness from struggling against the stimulus to accepting your ability to choose a response. Responsibility allows us to say, number one, I have choices. Wait a minute. Wait a minute. I've got choices here. You feel how that feels? Remind yourself. I may not know what my choices are, but damn it, there must be some choices here. I'm a pretty smart person. And number two, there are always more choices than are immediately apparent. So let's see if we can discover some. And the more we relax, more creative, insightful, imaginative we become. And we realize a third option, a fourth alternative, a fifth nuance, a sixth way of looking at things, and become a veritable fount of creative options, choices. And third, it begins to occur to us that our choices lie in two significant areas. By giving up the struggle against the stimulus, or fighting what's already happened, We can choose our perspective, our viewpoint, and also our response. Stimulus, perception, response. Well, we can't control the stimulus. I tried pointing a gun at the guy's head, and he still treated me badly. Lied and cheated, and said bad things, did bad things, hurt me, destroyed this or that. I tried everything. I can't control very much of the outer world. Sometimes I have a little influence, but by and large, the stimulus in my life is out of my hands. Besides, it's already happened. How can I reverse what's already happened without a time machine of some sort? So what am I struggling against? That which has already gone downstream. Stimulus, perception, response. That leaves me perception and response. I do have choices in how I look at it. Maybe I just need to look at things differently. That's a choice. And then how many different ways can I respond? Including not responding just yet. When I don't know what to say, I could choose to say nothing. When I don't know what to do, I could choose to do nothing, at least for a minute or two. Remember an architect that came to me years ago because he couldn't pass the licensing exam. And I talked to him for about 10 or 15 minutes, and he insisted that he knew the material, but he just couldn't seem to pass the exam. And he explained to me that it was largely an oral exam. And trusting my intuition, I said at one point, "How quickly do you answer?" He says, "Oh, immediately." And I said, "Why?" He said, "Well, because I'm supposed to know this stuff, and I'm afraid if I don't answer right away, I'll give the impression that I don't know the material." I said, "Yeah, but you've failed the exam twice, so, and you insist that you do know the material, so maybe the problem is that you answer too quickly. What would happen if you waited and allowed yourself to consider the question and the different ways you could respond before you begin to speak? Would that make you look bad, stupid, uninformed?" And he thought about it for a minute and said, "No, I don't think so." And I said, "In fact, it might make you look pretty smart, don't you think, if you carefully considered your response before you spoke?" And he said, "Yeah, I never really thought about that." And a week later, he passed the exam with flying colors because he didn't answer right away. Notice how often. What is an argument? Why do people talk over each other? What's your big hurry to get your point out there that you would interrupt and talk over the other person? or demand that the other person be absolutely silent and not respond at all so that you can get it together and say your piece without interruption. What's the damn hurry? Where's the sense of urgency? The brain thinks you're in danger. It's just an argument or a disagreement. You're not in danger, but the brain thinks you're in danger. That's where the urgency comes from. Remind yourself you're not. Take your time. I have choices. There are always more choices than are immediately apparent. And while I have little or no choice in what's already been done to me or said to me, or the situation I now find myself in, my choices, my many, many, many permutations and variations and combinations lie in my perspective and my carefully considered response. And I can substitute even tempered, well-reasoned responses for reflexive outbursts. And the place to realize that begins here in meditation. The place to learn that is now. Tell yourself, this is good, I understand this. This will be easy to remember. And the next time I catch myself flustered, confused, overwhelmed, bullied, rhetorically attacked, emotionally hurt, frustrated, humiliated, I'll take a breath, relax, let go of my resistance, find refuge in this safe place, no matter what's happening around me. Let go of the tug-of-war rope. Give up the struggle. Stop pulling back or resisting or fighting. And say to yourself, I have choices. Always more choices than are immediately apparent in the way I look at this, in the way I respond. And number 4, I choose my perspective and my response for the greater good of all. Not just myself, because I'm really not in danger, but to the best of my ability for the greater good of all. And then you speak your truth. You offer your suggestion. You make your declaration. And let it go. Plant the seed. Dust yourself off and walk away. My work here is done. Tell yourself this would be easy to remember. I have choices. That's what it means to accept responsibility. Prepare to return to the wide awake state. Bring with you this understanding with a crystal clear memory. Remembering you can return here and think this through again and again and again. Practicing becoming more clear. Sense a gentle rising up as you move, like waking up slowly toward the wide awake state. Feel the furniture that's supporting you, the room, remembering the room in which you sit, the Zoom class in which you're participating. And now open your eyes, wide awake, back in the room. Eyes open now, wide awake, with a little stretch maybe, and another nice, slow, nice, big, slow, deep breath. Letting go again as you exhale. Feeling fine, better than before, eyes open, back in the room, wide awake. Good. Hope you enjoyed that. Some valuable stuff for you there. All right. So I have some bullet points I want to consult, make sure I'm consistent here on the 7 doors to personal transformation. And I've already talked about what that is. Going through the heart, seeing the emotional nature, our emotional intelligence is the path, really. The first door toward the wisdom of the soul and the transformation or metamorphosis. I mean, we all love that allegory of the caterpillar becoming the butterfly. It's so rich. The ancients also, if you've ever wondered why is there a snake on a stick on the ambulance? What is that? And also the caduceus, which represents the spine, that has 2 snakes, which is more of an occult symbol. If you ever see that on an ambulance, they've made a mistake. It should be the Asclepius wand, a single staff with a single snake. That's the medical, allopathic medicine, pharmaceuticals, and surgery and such. That's what that represents. But why the snake? Why the 2 snakes on the caduceus or the single snake on the medical symbol? It's this ancient idea that because the snake sheds its skin and survives, that it's a symbol of transformation, of metamorphosis, of reincarnation, of eternal life. And that's the story of the snake. And they used to, in ancient Egypt, they would, in the hospitals, release snakes at night. A dozen snakes just allowed to roam, to slither freely around the ward as if they would promote healing. That's where all of that comes from. So we have to begin our 7 steps or doorways to transformation with the idea of confronting fear. Unless and until we confront fear and recognize its many names and the forms that it takes, as we've already discussed, the idea of tension, muscular tension, or pressure, and the way it debilitates the immune system and scatters our attention. And there's a reason for it. It's to help you survive any danger that may be triggering this fear. Most fear has nothing to do with danger. It's just what we don't know or understand. In fact, even when danger is real, clear, and present, fear is what we don't understand about the danger. So fear, all fear is fear of the unknown, whether dangerous or not. So doesn't it make sense that knowledge and understanding would be the antidote? That's what confronting fear is all about. And so, again, it's a matter of great character. You have to turn and face it. If you always run from your fear or seek to ignore it or deny it or have another drink or smoke another joint or there's other diversions. Maybe you're a workaholic and there's just no room in your life. You stay so deliberately busy, there's no room to worry. You're terrified and you're running. That's all you know. You don't stop and consider, what exactly am I running from? That's what we have to confront. Addressing emotional pain, confusion, uncertainty, and unawareness, and asking ourselves, why do I feel this way? What is the meaning? What is the significance of my emotional pain? That's the path. That's the direct path. You put your feet on the path when you turn and confront your fear. I remember Alan Watts saying years and years ago, if you meet a ghost on the trail, give them a hug. That's all they want. It represents what you don't know. And it's arriving with a treasure, with a gift for you, which is to know and understand what it is you're afraid of. It's the fear and anxiety and stress, everything from panic and horror to nervousness and mild apprehension, phobias, OCD, PTSD, ADHD, general anxiety disorders, social disorder. It's all fear. And it's the brain's request for more information. That's all. That's all it is. Number 2 is confronting ignorance. Well, number 1, confronting fear, is why do I feel this way? Number 2, confronting ignorance, is why do I believe this? Or why do I think this way? Why do I think this is true? Do you know this is true? Way back in the day, doing radio talk shows, part of the fun of doing telephone talk radio shows, or just anybody could call, is helping people unmask their biases and their prejudices with simple questions like, why do you believe that? Well, where did you learn that? Well, what evidence do you have? I mean, why do you believe this is true? And often people would say, well, everybody knows this is true. No, everybody doesn't know. In fact, I happen to, I'll give you an example that often would come up. Capital punishment. Well, we've got to have capital punishment. Why? Well, it deters crime. Does it? What do the studies show? Oh, I don't know. Well, let me tell you about the studies, and then I'd come up with some facts that show actually there's no evidence at all that capital punishment deters crime. Actually, states with capital punishment tended to have higher crime. Couldn't really explain that either. But not only was what they were saying untrue, it was very untrue. It was the opposite of true. It was deeply false. Capital punishment does not deter crime. Where did you learn that? Well, everybody knows that. Well, okay, everybody around you perhaps, but no, the research has been done. I just showed you 3 studies. 4 studies, 5 studies, credible, high credible studies, double blind studies. And most people don't know why they believe what they believe. It's just an assumption, often is not, that gets reinforced by some often conventional wisdom. Maybe you call it peer pressure. The people you hang with, the people you feel an affinity to, they have this set of beliefs, these maybe even values, maybe even it forms a culture, right? And so many things are seen through a political lens now that have nothing to do with politics. COVID, vaccinations, masks. What's political about that? Abortion. What is political about abortion? Where's the politics come in on that? You see? And yet we accede to that, or we concede the argument as if it's political and we want government to do something. There ought to be a law. Maybe there shouldn't be a law. Maybe there should be more liberty and more freedom and more personal responsibility. And that's the third point, is to accept responsibility. So confront fear, number one. That's first doorway. Why do I feel this way? Face it. Embrace it. And look for the meaning and understanding of your anxious emotions. Confront ignorance. Admit that you don't really know who you are, you don't know what you're for, you don't know why you're here, and you're fascinated. Did a whole thing yesterday with the Salam group about how can your life be wonderful if you don't wonder? Continually question. Seek to be fascinated. Use beginner's mind. Become like little children, Christ said. Find the wonder and the awe and the mystery, the majesty and the magic in the things that we tend to overlook as adults because we think we know things. No, you don't. Embrace the ignorance. There's joy in wondering. you, you can really make your life wonderful by wondering, by questioning and admitting what you don't know. And third, this idea of responsibility. We just did a whole meditation on the ability to choose your response. That's responsibility. Accountability is a good word for it also. This is going beyond awareness of situations to awareness of self. I was hired to write, and for 3 years I facilitated at the Sheriff's Academy in Orange County, California, a breakthrough self-awareness training because these law enforcement officers had been trained in situational awareness. They knew how to scope out the situation, to clear the house. You just don't assume that there's nobody hiding in the back room or under the bed or in the closet or the attic. You clear those spaces and, you don't just presume that the guy's going to come out the front door. Maybe there's a back door. They come out the window. So you surround the house. You anticipate what somebody who wasn't trained might not anticipate. That's situational awareness. But they had not been trained in self-awareness. They didn't realize that if they had a bad day, that maybe if they had an argument with a spouse in the morning, that they could carry that energy to work with them. And an hour into the job, they pull some guy over for running a stop sign, and the next thing you know, there's a violent confrontation. People get hurt. People get shot. All because you were having a bad day as a cop, and you weren't aware of it. So responsibility for how you respond, for how you feel, for what you're thinking, for who you are. Number 4 in these 7 doorways is critical thinking. I think there's a quotation by Aristotle. I can't pull it out of my memory right now, but it's some complaint about kids today and why they have no respect for their elders. And I know my point is this is an eternal complaint. But I must say, even at the risk of sounding like an old codger who's just playing this old song again, what's happened to kids today? When I was a kid, you know, but the ability to think critically seems to have been lost or destroyed or atrophied. It seems to be a combination of the deliberate undermining of education. Right-wing politicians are always talking about, reducing funding and even eliminating federal funds for education and promoting homeschooling. And then the technology, living on an iPad, growing up on an iPhone and iPad. I saw a little bit of Meet the Press this morning. I wasn't able to give it much attention, but the interview of Trump. And I was fantasizing, like, what kinds of questions would I ask Trump? It wouldn't be about politics. I think I'd start by asking him whether the sun revolves around the earth or the earth around the sun. Um, who fought who in World War II? you know, where is Kansas? I think he might have a problem with these. And there's a frustration we have with so-called stupid people. Well, they're not stupid. They may not be as well educated as a generation or two ago, but the real problem, I think, is a lack of critical thinking. And it's replaced largely by this binary either or, all or nothing. Man, this is the whole secret of Fox News. I'll tell you, as a professional journalist, as a broadcast journalist, that's the distinction. There's no nuance. There's no third way. There's no permutations or combinations or variations. Everything is stark, either or, two-dimensional, all or nothing, Republican or Democrat, conservative or liberal, fascist or communist, and a lot of name-calling and bomb-throwing. And the far left and the far right are both guilty of this. But the problem is the far left and the far right and the whole left-right conservative liberal spectrum is two-dimensional. And doesn't allow for the middle. The middle way is a major concept of wisdom in Buddhism. I often think of a playing field, a football field, for example, and the middle is not, consider the football field, the middle is not the 50-yard line. The middle, I would have you consider, is the entire playing field from this end zone all the way down the field to the other end zone. And the black and white either-or thinkers, all or nothing, are trying to play a game in the end zone, which is out of bounds. The only thing you can do in an end zone is score a point. But the game is played on the 100 yards in between. And it could be a 60-40 or 70-30. I could talk about the 25-yard line. I can't really talk about the 75-yard line, but you know what I'm talking about. The 25-yard line on the other end of the field. Or the swing of the pendulum. That's a broad distance, a wide distance that pendulum swings. And yet reactionaries in general, left or right, would have us believe it's all this and none of that, or all of that and none of this. Love it or leave it, my way or the highway. Watch out for that. Because not only does stress and fear, anxiety, worry, doubt, nervousness promote either or thinking, but either or binary false dichotomies create more fear and more stress. Critical thinking is many things, but it includes discerning task-related thoughts from task-unrelated thoughts, something we also talked about yesterday in our small Salam group. A task-related thought is purposeful and deliberate. You're performing a task, you're reading, you're writing, you're making a decision, you're solving a problem, you're writing a list, studying a map, making a chart, deciding upon a conversation or participating in a conversation, being logical, reasonable, doing a math problem. This is TRT, task-related thinking, and it's when we're at our best. Isn't she smart? Task-unrelated thinking is not even thinking, but we call it thinking. Task-unrelated thinking is the monkey mind. These are those largely negative, often self-loathing ideas. Again, if you want to call them thoughts, ideation, mental concepts that are intrusive, that come into your mind spontaneously without any deliberate effort on your part. It's what happens when you disengage from task-related thinking. Put your feet up, stare out the window, or maybe you're doing the dishes or padding around the house, picking things up or getting your laundry together or whatever, and your brain is filled with all of this monkey mind chatter. And we call it thinking. But it's not. It's just this random nonsense. Consider how many of those thoughts that occur to you are not true. Or are you under the impression that if it occurs to you as an idea, as a thought, it must be you thinking and therefore it must be true? Do you think every idea that comes to your mind is true? Do you believe every idea that comes to your mind about you is true? Because a big percentage of them will be critical, self-critical, self-loathing, filled with fears of inadequacy and concerns about what other people might think. Because you don't know, you don't have any perspective, right? We call it self-confidence, self-esteem, self-regard, self-respect, self-trust, self-love. But we ignore the word self in front of each of those and go to others, jumping through hoops, betraying our own best interest to try to earn from them the love, the trust, the respect, the regard, the esteem, the confidence. It's crazy. This is all part of thinking critically. Number 5 is developing emotional intelligence. To discover that we're not what we think of ourselves so much as we are what we care about. Consider that concept for a minute. In the battle between the head and the heart, who wins? Who do you give credence to? If it's about the world around you, something objective, I think you probably should favor the head over the heart. Because the mental nature is more about your perception of objects in the world and your relationship to the objective world of objects and forms, of things, and thoughts are things. Do you get that? The thoughts are things? They're objects? Emotions are much more subjective, they're personal. So if you have a battle between the head and the heart, but it's really about you, should I go to college or should I go to a trade school? Should I take this job or that job? Should I retire early? Whatever, right? Should I take a plane or the train? Just trust your heart. If it's about you, then elevate your emotional intelligence above your mental intelligence. And then, of course, there's an interplay between the two because thoughts generate feelings, don't they? But also feelings generate thoughts. So it's like a ping pong game, a back and a forth. I've seen psychologists or I should say heard psychologists and social workers and therapists and psychiatrists even argue which is primary, the thought or the feeling. They can't decide. They haven't they haven't been able to figure that out at all. And so the debate continues. I would just have you consider, I'm not telling you the way it absolutely is. I just have you consider that thoughts are more objective and emotional feelings are more personal. They're more subjective. But school teaches us mental intelligence. It doesn't really teach us anything about emotional intelligence other than what we glean from our social interactions. I want to remind you that we're going to go to questions and comments in just a minute, and Melinda is our co-host again today, so if you have any question on anything, something during the meditation, or a comment, or a question or comment about these 7 doorways, this elevation toward personal transformation, send a little chat message to Melinda and say, I've got a question or a comment. Maybe you can give her an idea of what it is, summarize it in a sentence or two, and we'll go to those in just a minute. Number 5, as we continue through these doorways, let me summarize here. If number 1 is to confront fear, and number 2 to confront our ignorance, to accept responsibility is 3rd, to think critically is 4th, and developing emotional intelligence is 5th. What we're up to now, 6 and 7, get a little esoteric, because we're approaching a realization that we're not animals. We have animal bodies. We have animal impulses. Sometimes we behave like animals. But we also have a spiritual nature. And in many ways, to be a human is to stand at the crossroads of the animal nature and the spiritual nature. There's that old story often attributed to Native Americans where the elder says to his grandson, I have 2 wolves in me, and they're constantly fighting. And the little boy says, which one wins, grandfather? And the elder says, the one I feed. Or the allegory of the devil on one shoulder and the angel on the other. We're both. The devil is not a red guy, a guy in a red suit with a pitchfork running around tempting you. It's your animal nature. It's your ego. Let's get that straight. References to the devil are references to your animal nature, your base instincts, survival. It's all we care about. The self-centered self, the selfish self, the ego, the narcissist within. It's the animal nature. But again, we have these aspirations for love and harmony and unity and connection. We want hugs. We want smiles. We want music and dance. Number 6 is to practice mindfulness. This is to learn that we are the awareness behind and above our thoughts and our feelings and our perceptions of the world. Those 3 lower worlds, mental, emotional, and physical. Look, you know you are not the car you drive, but I bet you know people who think they are. You know you're not the home you live in, or which country club you belong to, or how much money you have, but we all know people who believe that's who they are. You're not the color of your skin, or the religion or ethnicity that you associate with, but we all know people who believe they are. So you're not your body, but you're also not your thoughts. And you're not your emotions. You know why we know that? Because they always change. You never have the thought that lasted forever. They ebb and flow, they come and go. Well, how true could it be if it's always in flux? You've never had a feeling that was permanent. They all ebb and flow. How real could they be? They're valuable, right? They're like gauges on the dashboard, but just because you fill up your gas tank doesn't mean it's always going to be full. Right? You have to watch the gauge. That's what thoughts and feelings are for. It's how am I doing? What's my condition? But that's not who you are. So if I'm not what I own, and I'm not my body, my ethnicity, my religion, my skin color, and I'm not my thoughts, and I'm not my feelings, who am I? What am I? A practice of mindfulness, number 6, will teach you you are the awareness of those things. Because often we're more aware of our thoughts than at other times. Awareness is a variable, but there is an absolute awareness, a capital A awareness above it all. And absolute subjectivity, absolute's a good word for it, where we capitalize awareness, or if you prefer, consciousness, or in Western religion, it's referred to as love. That's what love is. It's awareness, it's consciousness. And it stands above and behind thought, feeling, physicality, behavior, health, and your perception of objects in the world. And number 7, and this is the goal, this is the hardest of all to really grok. I am infinite consciousness. I am that capital A awareness. The goal is to make the subject of our experience an object of absolute, undifferentiated subjectivity. This is the divine I am, or infinite consciousness. If you really want to wake up, you must understand that you are not merely the subject that you know as the separate self, observing all these objects in the world objectively. That ultimately there is only one subject, the source, the absolute, what people call God, a religious word for happiness, delight, joy, bliss, ecstasy, and understanding beyond all understanding. Awareness itself, the wonder, the awe, the fascination The feeling of, wow, how cool is that? That eye-opening, lid-lifting, aha. That, oh my. When was the last time you allowed yourself to feel that sense of discovery? How about living there and being the absolute subject in a non-dual level of awareness? Unified, no separation. That's the goal, right? Those are the 7 doorways. As I define them today, see me in a year, I may I may change my mind. Other people have different models and different versions. I'm not saying this is carved in granite and the only way to look at things, but that's uh, that's my offering for you for the day today. Melinda, do we have any questions or comments yet?
I think they're still percolating.
It's
I will
often.
say that you said something to me, and it was something like, what is the space between your thoughts like? You helped me out with that, and it gave me it gave me a reference point that I've been going back to. What happens in between my thoughts? For some reason, that was very powerful for me.
The gaps between your thoughts is a phrase that teachers, mystics, uh, transpersonal psychologists, and others use to introduce us to the idea that behind thought and feeling and everything else is awareness. That's who we are, and that's ultimately what we are. And this is largely undiscovered. And this is what all the gurus and all the teachers have been trying to explain to us. So if you go back and look at the Upanishads or the Bhagavad Gita, um, if you look at the Old Testament, the New Testament, the Quran, um, the Enneads by Plotinus, and the books of alchemy in ancient Egypt, all, as above, so below, the Emerald Tablet, all of these principles are pointing to this idea that above and free of form, and thoughts are things, they're forms. And so too our emotions, as I say, they all rise and fall, they all come and go. How true, how real could they be? But there's awareness. How aware are we? How aware of being aware? That's what mindfulness is. Another way of saying the gaps between the thoughts is, well, there's many forms of self-inquiry. This is what we're working on in the Saturday Salon. By the way, I have one chair open in the Saturday Salon for anybody who is interested in really devoting themselves to this. An hour and 15 minutes once a week, Saturdays at 11 California time. Just email me at awmysteryschool@gmail.com. AW for Ageless Wisdom. awmysteryschool@gmail.com. Send me an email if you're interested in the Saturday Salon, or just check my website, michaelbenner.com, and look at personal development and classes. You'll see a whole thing on the salon and what we talk about. But the self-inquiry is a process of asking these kinds of questions, Mindy. A similar one is, in that gap between your thoughts, what remains that is not just another thought? And here's an exercise that we can all do right now. Everybody can do this right now. Just take a breath and relax. You may want to close your eyes for just a few moments. Again, feel a letting go feeling and relax. Turn your attention to that monkey mind, that never-ending train of thoughts that keeps petitioning you for attention. As you say to yourself, I wonder what thought will occur to me next. And you can open your eyes now and come back. And I'm sure everybody noticed your mind stalled out. For 3 or 4 seconds there, anticipating, I wonder what thought is going to occur to me next. Nothing came up. And yet you remained. You did not pass out or go unconscious or cease to be in the absence of thinking. And what a rare treat. You mean there is a place where I don't have to be bombarded by all these thoughts, many of them hurtful, demanding all these problems and heartaches, problems to be solved, hurt to be healed, that constant deluge. There is an escape. There's a way to let go of that and find some peace. Self-inquiry. Asking these questions, who am I? But you have to keep asking. You can't just ask once in a while. Well, I am Michael Benner. No, that's your name. Oh, well, I'm a retired broadcast journalist. No, that's what you did for a living. Oh, well, I am my wife's spouse. No, that's your relationship. Well, I'm the son of my parents. Oh, sorry, that's just your body. Who are you really? I'd say, well, I'm a child of God. All right. Where does that take you? And then what? And there are answers. You're the awareness of these things. You are aware. But to be aware of awareness itself, imagine the challenge. How can I be aware of awareness? It's by being aware of awareness itself that you become that awareness. Does that make sense? And let me ask you, Melinda, did your mind stall out when you asked that question? I wonder what thought will occur to me next.
It was pretty mind blowing. It would never have occurred to me to ask myself that. It's a very powerful one too. I go to that reference point a lot when I'm just running on overdrive. It's been very comforting tool.
You say you go to that a lot. You mean recently?
Yeah. Oh yeah. Cause you just said it to me, what, a week ago, maybe.
Good. So it impacted you, huh?
Yes, it didn't leave me like a lot of things do. Jack does have a comment on the meditation when you're ready.
Sure. Jack, go ahead.
Well, I do look forward to the meditations, and they're often spectacular, and because I have wonderful experiences.
Mhm.
And this was not only no exception, it was particularly impressive. And what I got from it was, or at least part of it, began when you suggested putting your awareness on the top of your head and being aware of, something, spirit, ethereal coming from above. So there was that. And then when you began talking about how we have we limit the amount of responses that we have, and we have many more choices. What I became aware of was that which comes from above is, at least in one sense, basically freedom. It's sort of infinitely free, and it's very primarily what we are as well. But when I'm looking at the world as a problem, which is how I look at the world much of the time, what I'm aware of is not that aspect of myself, but looking at the world as very kind of limited and boxed in, and so I look at, so my responses are according to how I look at the world, which is limited and boxed in. So I feel like I have very limited ability to respond to the world. And then I sort of I'm fighting with those the responses, which are often negative. And I realized then during the meditation that no, if I can remember and feel that freedom and bring it all the way into my heart, uh, there's no limitation in how I have to respond to the world. The world itself becomes infused with that freedom, and there's openness, and it just felt completely different, and even and pleasant even. It's like, oh, there's actually the world isn't actually a problem. A problem is always kind of a narrow, boxed in, limited thing that you're fighting against. The world is actually this deep freedom within us that wants to express itself and maybe play. And I was able to keep some sense of that freedom all the way through the meditation. It's like, well, this isn't just a good idea. This is a real thing. This is this is a fundamental thing. And so I really I thank you for that.
Well, thanks for returning the gift. It's so gratifying to. That's why I know it's difficult for people to speak up in a setting like this. I always sat in the back of the class too, and was always afraid to raise my hand for fear I'd sound stupid. I understand the reticence, but I so value when people speak up. It's you're returning the gift because I feel I now know that you had a taste of that freedom. And so that makes me feel good. At least Jack heard it. Let me share with you a story that's probably only 4,000 or 5,000 years old. Consider a jar. And 4,000 or 5,000 years ago, it would have been a clay pot. Consider that this clay pot, this jar, is empty, other than the space that it contains. Think about the fact that the jar, in fact, contains space. We could fill that space with water, or we could dump the water out, but the space remains contained by the jar, right? Now we break the jar. Where does that space that had been contained, where does that space go? And that's not rhetorical, that's a real question.
Well, the space didn't change. It was always actually infinite.
So the whole idea of the space being contained is really an illusion. There's nothing contained, right? Even though the jar has the capacity to contain space, to be filled with air, or to be filled with water, when it ceases to be, that space doesn't go anywhere. People say, where do you go when you die? Nowhere. Well, how could that be? Because you're already everywhere. Well, how could I already be everywhere? Well, when you drive around in your car listening to the radio, if anybody still does that, does it matter where the car is? Isn't the radio station everywhere you go? There it is. That's what spirit is. That's what energy is. Electromagnetic energy is everywhere. Where is the magnetic field around a bar magnet? Everywhere. Where's the magnetic field around the earth? Everywhere. This is what the Buddhist means by emptiness. Everything is empty because emptiness is everything. It's also fullness. And now you say, well, you're getting into those Zen koans now, Michael. Sound of one hand clapping and all of that nonsense. But this is what they're trying to get to. Sky is another great example. Zen Buddhists talk about sky all the time. Where is the sky? People point up. How can you touch the sky? Where does the sky begin? Where does the sky end? Oh, well, it really has no beginning, no end. The sky is everywhere. Well, where does the sky end and outer space begin? And you realize that these are just like false models, conventions of speech and mind. There is no sky. There's no such thing as sky. There's clouds that rise and fall, that come and go, but so the Buddha says, be the sky, not the clouds, not the thoughts that ebb and flow or the feelings that rise and fall, or I bought this, but it broke and I needed to get it repaired and they couldn't repair it, so I had to replace it. And I wanted to get the new and better iPhone, and breathlessly, there's the treadmill, there's the rat race. And it's all invented. It's all just an illusion. And so, of course, there's freedom in knowing that the jar doesn't really contain anything. The space that appears to be contained by the jar is already a part of all space everywhere. From one edge of the universe to the other, it's not really been contained except in an objective sense, but truthfully, there's no containment of that space. It's free. It's the ultimate freedom. And so, of course, you feel free when you rise above this separate objective nature of things. Is that resonating, hitting any points for you?
Yeah, it became more spacious. My sense of the sense of freedom went to uh, sheer openness.
To infinity.
Yeah, and plus it made me appreciate the jar more.
Yeah.
All the little details and things just now seem more marvelous.
Yes. Yes. Everything is marvelous. Everything is wonderful. Everything is that's the thing about psychedelics. It pulls out the stops. It opens up this filter that is the brain, and suddenly everything is everything. And then your friend over here that didn't do a tab of acid says, everything is everything? Dude, what are you talking about? Oh, the one is everything, and everything is the one, and all is nothing, and nothing is... What? You're tripping, man. Yeah. It's a reality that is difficult for us to get our thoughts around. You see, to really appreciate, except in these altered states of expanded awareness. And even then, it takes work. It takes a lot of work. And it just keeps unfolding, more and more miraculous, more and more beautiful, more and more wonderful. In order for life to be wonderful, we have to wonder, we have to question, always wonder. It's when you stop questioning and stop wondering that we shut down and suffer. When we think we know things, that's when we shut down and suffer. The know-it-all. Nobody likes a know-it-all. Anybody else, Mindy?
I think that's about it. So I guess it's so that fights me staying in this physical form and makes the idea of death so terrifying to so many.
Yeah, there is no death. There's no birth, there's no beginning, there's no end. Only to the objects, but not the subject.
Mm. Yeah, just sometimes that's like, I hate to say a rationalization, but especially in the view of actually those emotions of loss or fear or illness. I mean, the hard parts, those are just like the jar. I mean, like Jack's example, that the jar is real as long as it is, and his comparison of appreciating the jar, or at least just understanding the aspects of the jar. I mean, it's there. While it's there. I don't know. I guess I still get a little stuck on that.
Uh, it's the two truths doctrine, and we're pretty much out of time, so I'll be brief and we'll wrap this up. But in Buddhism in particular, although it's found elsewhere in philosophy, the two truth doctrine allows for an absolute and a relative truth. So there's an absolute reality and also a relative reality. And what most people say, what they mean when they say it's reality, it's real, I can touch it, I can see it, I can taste it, smell it, feel it. They mean it's a real object. But an object is not the subject. Objects are separated from subjects. This is the classic subject-object split. So that's the relative reality of form, where everything is separate from everything. There is, however, also an absolute. And the example in my book, Fearless Intelligence, is my two friends, one from Alaska, one from Hawaii. You've probably heard me say this. It's 65 degrees, and my friend from Alaska takes off his shirt and loves the warm, balmy day, 65. And my friend from Hawaii wants a sweater. He's freezing. Which one of them is wrong? You see, and so the relative truth is warm, cold, big, small. Is there really something called jumbo shrimp? How big is big? How fast is fast? When does fast become slow? These are all relative concepts. There is an absolute, however, above and free of all of that. But it's esoteric. It's ineffable often. In the case of the temperature, it's easy enough. The absolute is at 65 degrees, unless, of course, you use another absolute scale called Celsius or centigrade or Kelvin. Now it's going to be a different number, but it's still an absolute, mathematical absolute, like the square root of 9. It's not a subjective thing. Somebody pointed out the other day, 1 and 1 do not always make 2. And the interviewer says, well, that's crazy. Give me an example. She said, this morning I had 2 piles of laundry and I put them together and I had 1 pile. 1 and 1 is 1. May sound silly, but I think the two truth doctrine can help you with that, Melinda. The idea that, well, maybe both things are true. Maybe there is an absolute, but we live in a world of relative truths, of subjective truths. And your truth and my truth might be very different.
Yeah, that's helpful.
Yeah. Okay, thank you. Thank you, everyone, for being here. Sorry we ran over. Namaste, aloha, salam. Please unmute, say thank you to your neighbors and your friends, and we'll hope to see you next Sunday. Okay?
Thank you
So
very much.
Thank you, everyone.
Okay, goodbye.
Good to see you all.
Thanks. Bye, everybody.